Welcome to the Ronald Jones Listening Project. Ronald Jones was the guitarist for a band called the Flaming Lips. They are from Norman, Oklahoma, and this project covers the band's years from about 1991 to 1996. The band has since become more popular and achieved greater commercial and critical success. They've earned Grammys and collaborated with artists ranging from Beck to Miley Cyrus. This project, though, focuses on what came before all of that. Although I've been familiar with the band for a number of years, it was only recently that I really heard Ronald Jones. I was so blown away with his playing that I felt compelled to do something, and this is the result. I felt I had to do something, say, archival. I don't want to rank Ronald on some list of great guitarists, so I'll just say that I find his playing to be generationally significant. There also isn't a whole lot out there on Ronald. And here I should clarify it's the live footage and audio that's crucial here. Ronald's playing can definitely be heard in the studio albums that he appeared on, but live, both he and the band were something altogether different. The band itself has added to what little live material is out there through their re-release of their 1995 album Clouds Taste Metallic, which is part of this Heady Nugs box set. The set of CDs also includes a remastered live recording from 1996, which features Ronald. It's excellent, and I will be including some of that audio in this piece as well.
But you can love your brain, even if it slips down the drain. I said, man, I'm not some drug addict, but a person's gotta have something to keep them from going insane.
What follows is a bit on the band's history and some analysis on what I think makes Ronald such a special and extraordinary musician. Interspersed, I've included some discussion of other bands and guitarists which I think will provide some context to the band's music from this period, and Ronald Jones as a guitarist. I do want to thank 3 YouTube posters in particular, who made both my discovery of Ronald and this project possible. When I really heard Ronald for that first time and began researching him, I had this sensation of, is anyone else hearing what I'm hearing? And thankfully, these 3 were also fans of Ronald and have posted some excellent live footage. Those 3 posters are Byray, Future Heart, and Chris B. Thanks so much. I'm approaching this history of the band from the perspective that you know nothing about the Flaming Lips. The Flaming Lips, as I mentioned, are a band out of Norman, Oklahoma, and they began life in about 1983 as a more or less straightforward punk rock band, though one with some odd psychedelic sensibilities, meaning Skulls, Blood, and Fire, as opposed to the Paisley and Flowers, say, of the late 60s. If you know anything about the band at all, it likely has Wayne Coyne's face associated with it. He founded the band and is part songwriter, lead vocalist, creative director, promoter, and visionary. During the period in which Ronald was in the band, Wayne also played guitar, though he mostly uses it as a prop now. Under his direction, the band's shows have become quite elaborate with confetti, balloons, and animal costumes. Wayne famously surfed the crowd from within a plastic ball, and it's one of these hamster ball type things, and he can get inside of it as it's made for a person, and it's something completely from the mind of Wayne Coyne. Bass player Michael Ivins has been with Wayne from the beginning, and unlike Wayne, Michael Ivins appears to prefer to be in the background. Along with playing the bass, Michael Ivins also assists with the mixing and producing of the band's studio albums.
Critically for the band, drummer and multi-instrumentalist Stephen Drozd joined the band in 1991. In addition to being an outstanding drummer, he also plays the piano and the guitar and really pretty much any instrument he touches. Currently, he writes most of the band's music. He is really a very talented musician. In addition to Ronald on guitar, this 1991 to 1996 period is also special because it features Stephen Drozd on drums.
The band, though, was still in need of a guitar player, and after working with a couple of different guitarists, Ronald auditioned and joined the band. It was actually one of the interim guitarists that recommended Ronald to the band. Ronald was from Norman, Oklahoma as well, and was playing in another local band at the time. He was the youngest member at about 20, roughly the same age as Stephen Drozd when he joined the band.
So embryonic, it's alright. So embryonic, it's alright. I've been born before, I'm getting used to it. Brain dead is how it always is.
Knew how talented Stephen was. Stephen knew how talented Ronald was. So we can all sort of get together and say, boy, Ronald's a really, amazing, unique, weird guitar player. When Ronald came in, Ronald had this musicalness about him that I don't think me and Michael could ever understand, but Stephen could. So Stephen could tell us, oh, Ronald, he really, So I think our focus went not away from Stephen, but we focused on Ronald because Stephen helped us focus on Ronald because Ronald was he really is a unique, great, genius player himself. And Stephen was a great drummer, and so we had this powerful band.
Under this lineup, the band released 2 albums, Transmissions from a Satellite Heart in 1993 and Clouds Taste Metallic in 1995. I should note that due to these lineup changes and issues with the record company, this lineup, the one that included Ronald, also was responsible for playing and promoting material from their two earlier albums, In a Priest-Driven Ambulance from 1990 and Hit to Death in the Future Head from 1992. Over the course of these four albums, the Flaming Lips transformed their sound into this prog rock meets punk rock. I don't know exactly what you call it. And again, there was this live versus studio dynamic that makes it all the more difficult to easily categorize the band's music. They did have a radio hit during this period. It was She Don't Use Jelly from Transmissions. It's a pop gem, and I just absolutely love this song. I've loved it ever since it came out, and here's a clip from their performance on David Letterman.
Goes to shows, and when he's at home and he blows his nose, he don't use tissues or his sleeve, he don't use napkins or any of these. He uses
After Ronald left the band in 1996, the band dramatically shifted its sound. If you know any of the Flaming Lips music, it's likely from their album Soft Bulletin, which came out in 1999, or even more likely it's from their album Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, which came out in 2002. These are very good albums and were well received critically. This more recent sound is sometimes labeled as post-punk, which means electronic sounds and keyboards are used, and those are prioritized over, say, the traditional sound of the rock and roll electric guitar. This change in sound contributed to the band's 3-decade existence, and although I do like their more recent music and I have tremendous respect for Wayne and the band's longevity, in my opinion, it's nothing like the live material from this Ronald Jones era. I want to preface this portion on my personal history by saying I'm not some huge Flaming Lips fan. Much of my passion and interest in the band, and specifically this 1991 to 1996 era, is recent. I've been to just 2 shows and I previously owned a few of their albums. I'm not a millennial, so those 2 concerts are separated by about 20 years. So I first saw the Flaming Lips in 1992 when an acquaintance at college who was from Oklahoma City said he could get us in on the guest list. So a group of us drove a couple hours to Atlanta to see the band. The 2 things I remember from that show is that they were one of the strangest bands I had ever seen, and to date it is probably the loudest concert I have ever been to. I remember it as just being overwhelmingly loud. I didn't see the band again until 2013, and by this time, as I've mentioned, they were a much different band. The performance and the music was more orchestrated. Wayne was out in front on a 5-foot-high pedestal that looked like it was out of the movie Aliens, and the band was in the background, kind of behind a curtain of LED lights. Wayne held a doll baby for a good third of the show, and then there were lasers, and of course at the end there were balloons and confetti. So back in December of 2015, I was randomly reflecting on these 2 different concerts and how the band's sound had changed. So I went to Wikipedia and noted Ronald's name, and that's really about it. And then about a month later, say in January of 2016, I again thought about this, but this time I went to YouTube instead of Wikipedia and saw this footage.
This footage was really the genesis for this whole project, and it still blows me away seeing it now. After that, I watched whatever I could find from this era on YouTube, and I started looking for bootlegs and reading interviews. Coincidentally, I learned that the band had released the Henny Nugs box set and that remastered concert from 1996. Once I heard it, I knew Ronald was the real deal. I was fairly positive before that, but that recording absolutely confirmed it.
In trying to describe the Flaming Lips from this period, and I do have other live footage, but I also found this New York Times review from 1995, so this period that included Ronald. One of the things, again, that was different about them, that was primarily because of Wayne, was their stage show, and that set them apart from other bands. I paired it up with some other audio and some other video to try and bring it to life, but here's that review.
Put your face up to the window. Tell me all about your gay folks. It feels better when you're in it. If you're nervous, use the payphone.
In discussing the broader musical context, I suppose there are a variety of places one could begin. I'm going to begin with the Scottish band Jesus and the Mary Chain and their debut album from 1985, Psycho Candy. According to Wikipedia, the album is considered a landmark recording. Its combination of guitar feedback and traditional pop song structures proved influential on the forthcoming shoegazing genre and alternative rock in general.
The sun comes up another day begins, and I don't even know if I can stay on good. And so I'm looking good, but when the sun goes down, I'm gonna start again. Never understand me. You never understand me,
The first thing I just wanted to say quickly is that this term shoegazing gets thrown around to some of these bands that employ noise, or I guess more generally just distorted guitars. I'm not a big fan of the term. Its origin comes from the British music press, and it just referred to the fact that some of these bands would, the members would stare down at their feet as they played and wouldn't interact with the audience or whatever. AllMusic gives the Psycho Candy album 5 stars and calls it a cross between the melodies of the Beach Boys and the beat and distortion of the Velvet Underground, but that combination cranked to 10. Here's a second clip from their album Psycho Candy, and this is actually their second single off the album. And just note the distorted guitars here that they use. So I don't really know if the Flaming Lips or Ronald listened to Jesus and the Mary Chain or not, but Ronald and the band were clearly working off some of the same musical fabric, and that's not really surprising. What Jesus and the Mary Chain did with their album Psycho Candy was really had a ripple effect, and there were a lot of bands that used this distortion in their sound. What originally got me thinking, though, about this connection between the Flaming Lips and Psycho Candy was a cover that they did during these years. It's an early Beatles tune called What's the New Mary Jane, and I have it as part of this Sweet Jesus It's the Lords of Love Noise bootleg that I got off eBay, and it's quite good. If you see it, I tell you, and you like this era stuff, I tell you to pick it up. What you're going to hear in this clip is it's a very similar sound, and then out of nowhere there's this drone that comes in, and of course that's Ronald playing in the background. I just think it's an awesome cover. To the sonic elements, though, what I've recently started thinking about, and I don't know if I'm overthinking it, but if I'm not, it's actually quite clever. This is a cover of a song by a British invasion band, that being the Beatles, and it's done in the style of another British invasion band, that being Jesus and the Mary Chain. Now, Jesus and the Mary Chain, it wasn't the same type of invasion. It was a little bit more subtle than that, but they did have an influence on a lot of bands from this period, and with this distorted guitar. So regardless, this is a good cover, and I think it's a little more interesting when viewed in that light as well. The next point in this discussion is the band My Bloody Valentine. Now, I probably would have featured them anyway, but I've included elsewhere two Stephen Drozd quotes, one from 2007 and another from 2013, where he compares Ronald to being a cross between Miles Davis and Kevin Shields. And that really got me curious, because I knew Stephen Drozd to be a talented musician, and then I heard the 1996 concert, and at least to my ears, that is what I heard in Ronald's playing on that, in that show. Now, Miles Davis doesn't need any introduction, but if you're not familiar with Kevin Shields, I think you really missed part of the point here and the power of this quote from Stephen Drozd. Their second album came out in 1992, and it's called Loveless. It's an excellent introduction both to the band and to Kevin Shields. As you heard in that clip, the theme here again is these heavily distorted guitars, but over top of these guitars there are serene, almost angelic voices which come from female vocalist and guitarist Belinda Butcher. Her vocals soften the distortion, and the analogy that came to my mind is what Kim Deal does with the Pixies, namely softening Joey Santiago's atonal guitar and the abrasiveness of Frank Black's lead vocals. According to Wiki, while Loveless did not achieve great commercial success upon its release, it received enthusiastic reviews from critics who praised its sonic innovation. Since its release, Loveless has been widely proclaimed as among the best albums of the 1990s by critics, as a landmark work of the shoegazing genre, there we have shoegazing again, and as an influence on various subsequent artists. AllMusic gave the album 5 stars and calls it a masterpiece, and the 2,274 reviews there also give it 5 stars, and you can count me among that group as well. Kevin Shields is the lead guitarist and main musical mind behind the band, and in trying to explain My Bloody Valentine and Kevin Shields as a guitarist, I found this BBC piece which I thought might help explain it.
This reappraisal of the guitar's role in rock music was giving birth to new guitar methodologies. The riff was getting experimental again.
How many pedals have you got, do you know?
No, I don't know. A good few hundred. It's sort of various types of distortion, really. It shouldn't work, but it really works.
At the vanguard of this fresh wave of sonic experimentation was a band from Dublin, My Bloody Valentine.
You hear My Bloody Valentine for the first time and nothing prepares you for it. It's like, what is this? It's like a mermaid falling into a black hole or something.
I think those early My Bloody Valentine records are groundbreaking sonically. Just with adding these little bends and things with his wangy bar, it just causes these beautiful swells.
Instead of just going, you know, I got it. And that really creates all these juxtapositions of tone.
Kevin Shields' guitar riffs were drowned in an ocean of feedback, played at a volume designed to shake buildings and make a few ears bleed.
I was never interested in particularly standard rock guitar sounds. The sound that we were going for in our head was like so loud and so everything's squashed together. It's a bit like an infinite horizon. It just goes on and as far. And unlike a horizon where your eyesight stops, with sound you can imagine it infinitely. That whole volume extreme thing, at a certain point your brainwave changes to more around 7 hertz, and that basically creates a trance state. The first time we did it, we just did it for an hour, and at the end of the hour we were laughing hysterically. We were like little kids. We were just high, and so we wanted people to experience that. But then, of course, 1/3 of the audience is left by that point, really angrily, and they haven't had a meditative experience.
At the dawn of the 90s, alternative bands like My Bloody Valentine on both sides of the Atlantic continued their exploration of the riff beneath the radar.
There are two things I'd like to note about that video there. First, Kevin Shields talked about bending the notes, and I think Ronald was doing something similar in the way he played the guitar and bending the notes as opposed to playing them straight forward. And second, in that piece, you heard a comparison to the sound of My Bloody Valentine as being a mermaid falling through a black hole. And in thinking about Ronald's playing as it relates to the cosmos, I find his playing to be more like a mermaid falling through a wormhole. Because in listening to Ronald play, I hear a relationship with other periods of music. I mean, he can sound like something, some early 80s version of U2 or some kind of new wave guitar sound. And then he can do the punk rock thing, and then with the slide, he can veer off into something country western or, all points in between. There is one, to me, critical difference that I'd like to point out, and Kevin Shields is known to be a perfectionist, and so much so that they did not release My Bloody Valentine did not release a follow-up to Loveless until 2013, more than 20 years later. And the difference here is that Wayne, in some of his interviews, has mentioned that during the 3-year period in which Ronald was the guitarist, the Flaming Lips played something like 300 shows. And for me, as a fan of live music, I just got to say here that on the one hand, you got Kevin Shields and 22 years between releases, and on the other hand, Ronald was going out there and doing it every night. I'm going to split my analysis of Ronald's playing between techniques and effects. And by techniques, I mean physical ways that he manipulated the guitar sound, things that he did to the guitar itself. And by effects, I mean an electronic way that he manipulated the guitar sound. And as we saw in the Kevin Shields piece, it's guitar pedals that are used to manipulate the guitar sound electronically. So the first technique I'd like to discuss is the slide. And the slide originated quite some time ago, really in early American blues music. So the sound really comes from using a cylindrical object along the strings of the guitar, and rather than using a beer bottle these days or a bottle with a glass neck, they manufacture these glass tubes, and guitar players use them as they play up and down the guitar. Now, they also are made out of metal, and Ronald used a metal slide as opposed to a glass slide. And rather than, listen to me talk a lot more here about the slide, I thought we'd turn to Joe Walsh to explain it.
Turn your lamp down low.
I'm glad you asked that. I learned to play slide from a guy named Duane Allman. If you've heard of the Allman Brothers, the lead singer is Greg. For a period of time, Greg's brother Duane was the guitar player. Duane was killed in an automobile accident, and he was pretty young, but I had the opportunity to play some concerts where the Allman Brothers were on the same show when Duane was alive. And I got to sit down with Duane, and he showed me how to play slide guitar. I'm gonna play an E chord. There's an E chord. But I need my left hand. So I'm gonna tune the guitar to an E chord. Now, Duane Allman used a glass tube from an old cold medicine called Coricidin in the United States. It was an over-the-counter medicine. And he would empty that out and use that glass tube. Glass has a real sweet sound. Real sweet. I got a brass one today, because I don't travel with glass because it breaks. I've got a brass piece of metal, polished, and any finger will work. Whatever finger feels the most natural, that's the one you use. I use this one, okay? When you play guitar, you put your fingers between the frets. You put your finger there so that it's on this fret and the note starts on the fret. With slide, you play right on the fret, over it, and parallel to it. That's different. You have to get used to that.
The interesting thing here about the slide is that I am really at a loss to try and think of another guitarist for a punk rock band that used the slide, unless maybe it was some kind of, rockabilly kind of throwback type band. But Ronald didn't use it in that way. He used it in a way and kind of made it all his own. And nowhere is that kind of more made itself more known than really in the band's only radio hit, which was the She Don't Use Jelly song.
Performing She Don't Use Jelly, here's the Flaming Lips.
Now, in reading about She Don't Use Jelly, I stumbled onto an interview with Stephen Droz where he actually says that he played the slide on the album version of the song, which I didn't even realize. But in thinking about that, I just wondered if Ronald had picked up the slide because of the success of the song, or if he had been encouraged to by Stephen Droz. And then I stumbled across this video here from Chris B, and it's notable for a couple of reasons. He notes here that it's a song that he hasn't seen elsewhere, video elsewhere of. But it's notable to me for a couple other reasons. First, he's playing a Fender Stratocaster, it appears, which is a little bit different. He didn't typically play that guitar. The other more notable thing here on the discussion of the slide is that in the notes, Chris B says that this is one of Ronald's first concerts, and he had just joined up with the band. And if you look here, you can see that he's using the slide. So the use of that was something that he brought to the band, and it was not something that he developed later on. The next technique I want to mention is a pick scrape.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Guitar Tricks channel. I'm Neil, your host. We got a tip and a lesson happening right here and right now. Lesson of the week is on the pick scrape. One of the most recognized sounds in rock and roll. Even though it's a simple technique, there's tricks to make it sound really good, and I'm going to show you those tricks. Tip of the week is using string noise in your favor. That's right. So you're rocking out.
Ronald, though, really uses it a lot different. And here I should add, and I'll discuss this a bit later, but he was not using a standard guitar pick, and that's at least one of the reasons why he gets such a unique sound out of his guitar. He was using a quarter and using, as in the coin, and he could get different sounds by scraping a quarter up and down the guitar rather than a pick. You know, in the heavy metal, you'll see him, you know, run it from the body of the guitar up to the, you know, up the neck. But with Ronald, he's coming down from the other side, and sometimes he does it so dramatically that he has to get his chord hand out of the way to get it down, and then he grabs the neck of the guitar again and continues on. And it's really quite cool, and it's, again, a completely unique sound. I've never seen another guitarist use it quite this way, and definitely not to get the sound that he gets out of it. The next technique I'd like to mention is what I call a squelch. That's not the technical term, I don't know if there is one, but I heard the sound throughout Ronald's playing, and I didn't know exactly what he was doing, and I had never heard another guitarist kind of use this sound in their playing. And then I was watching this clip of the Barbary Coast, which Future Heart posted, and I believe it's from their 1994 concert in Oklahoma City. From researching the Fender Jaguar, the guitar that Ronald favored, Ronald appears to be just cranking the volume button that is located just below the strings on the body of the guitar, and perhaps he's doing something here with his chord hand. But again, it produces this, you know, unique sound. Trying to locate examples of this sound, I found this clip from that Lords of Love Noise bootleg, and here it's in between songs, and there's a bit of a dead air space here as the band is trying to find a drum key, but then you hear Ronald and this squelch sound.
Is there anybody in the house, being that this is a music-oriented sort of town, that has a drum key that we could borrow? This is the time where we wait for the response from the crowd. If you have one, just toss it lightly up. We'll do the rest. Yeah? Nobody? Okay. All right, thanks. Can we use it for the rest of the show? Okay. Well, thanks. Who was it? Who was it? It was you. It was the people in Wood Pussy. Can we use it for the rest of the show?
I want to mention a few other guitarists specifically. This is just a list I developed. It's not meant to be definitive. And with one exception, I have no knowledge that Ronald knew or listened to any of these guitarists. I didn't find any interviews with Ronald on this topic, so this is just a brief list that came to my mind as I listened to Ronald's playing. Because of the way Ronald uses noise and pedals and the volume at which the Flaming Lips played during this period, the most direct comparison to Ronald's playing is probably Kevin Shields, and I showed you those Stephen Droz quotes as well. But there's a certain physicalness to the way Ronald played that made me think of a couple of other guitarists, the first of which is Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth.
Ladies and gentlemen, please say hello to Sonic Youth.
I'm not a huge Sonic Youth fan. Some of this noise rock genre stuff just sounds like noise to me, but Thurston Moore employed noise and again had this physicalness with the way that he played. And Thurston Moore is well regarded by a lot of guitarists and has been around forever. So Thurston Moore definitely bears mentioning in regards to Ronald and the way Ronald played the guitar. The other guitarist that I like to mention here is Ira Kaplan of Yo La Tengo. I first started thinking about this relationship because I was thinking about other American bands that utilize this kind of shoegazing sound, and I immediately thought of Yo La Tengo, and I picked up their album I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One some years ago at a garage sale, just kind of randomly, and I just love the album. It utilizes many of these heavy distortion kind of effects that you also hear in this era of the Flaming Lips, and it came out in 1997, so just after the Flaming Lips had shifted kind of away from this sound. But I just read here in Wikipedia that Pitchfork gave it 9.7 out of 10. It's a great album, and as you'll see from this clip, Ira Kaplan again plays with a certain physicalness that is reminiscent of Ronald. want to mention Joey Santiago here of the Pixies as well, partly because, you know, it's the Pixies, and anytime you're talking about bands from this era, you have to mention the Pixies. They were just so foundational. But there's a certain tonal similarity that I hear between Joey Santiago and Ronald as well, and so I wanted to mention him. And I also found this clip. It's from a BBC documentary on the Pixies, and I saw it a number of years ago. But in researching, you know, Ronald, I started to think about this clip because Ronald does a lot of little things, and as you'll see here, I believe it's a quote from a member of the band Blur that said, "I could pretty easily figure out some of the things Joey was doing, but that's not the point, is it?" And in a similar way, these pick scrapes or, you know, this squelch sound are kind of little things, and sure, I could figure out from the video what Ronald was doing, but there's something in this quote that's about the moment of creation, and just because you can reproduce the sound, that's only part of the picture. The other picture is, how did you come up with this? And that's what I'm left thinking a lot when it comes to Ronald. But here's that clip from the BBC documentary.
3 were the colours that Santiago provided as a guitarist. I think as a guitar player, he's terribly underrated.
At the time, there were a lot of stunt guitar players, you know, in the late 80s, and I particularly wasn't a big fan of that.
His guitar playing is kind of, it seems so unsophisticated at times.
One of his trademarks being that he will often play 2 notes at very close intervals and bend one slightly out, so you feel like, you know, you feel like your whole body's going like that, and then it comes back down again.
It's much more about texture. He supplies extraordinary texture.
There's something desperate about the way Joey plays, where it's just striving to get something out of this instrument.
And I could work out pretty easily what he was playing, but that's not the point.
It's very, very brutal and yet really original, and just he's making sounds by how he's attacking the guitar rather than using electronics or gadgetry to change the sound of it.
The simplicity of it and the rhythm of it kind of echoed Charles's singing as well.
I know I wouldn't sort of play guitar like I do unless I'd listened. The thing was, it was a door to a whole new world.
One of the reasons we don't use guitars much anymore now is because, you know, there are only a handful of Pixies albums, and you kind of can't keep copying them, which it feels like is what we've done for so long.
The other thing that's in that clip there, and it's from the David Bowie quote, and it made me think of Ronald as well. Joey Santiago's guitar gave the Pixies sound a certain texture, and in a similar way, I think Ronald's playing gave the Flaming Lips songs from this period, specifically in the live context, a certain texture. I do want to mention an interview that I found with Adam Jones from the band Tool. This was really the only direct reference that I could find from a contemporary guitarist to Ronald. There were a couple other bands, but really their comments were more along the lines of, you know, I remember this Flaming Lips show and there were these weird sounds that the guitarist would make. Adam Jones here gets it, and in this interview he's asked about some of the guitar players that he's a big fan of. and there are a number of people there. And then down towards the bottom, there's this nice quote from Adam Jones here, and it was just neat to see it here. And this is where I got some of the information. I found it in another forum about Ronald using a quarter as his guitar pick versus a standard, say, triangular plastic guitar pick. Interestingly, I did read that the Flaming Lips came up with the name of their album, Clouds Case Metallic, when they were on tour, I believe, with Tool in Australia. So Adam Jones would have also seen Ronald's playing up close and in person. So the one exception here is Jay Mascis of Dinosaur Jr. Now, we do know that the Flaming Lips, I believe it was in 1992, did a short tour of the South, and they opened up for Dinosaur Jr. So Ronald Jones would have seen Jay Mascis play on a regular basis there through that tour. And honestly, had you asked me, a year ago who my favorite guitarist was from the 90s and to some degree to date, I would have said Jay Mascis. I just think that he is a master of melody and just writing a great guitar hook. So I'd like to discuss the effects that Ronald used, and I put together a list. It's not meant to be definitive, it's just my own list here, but I thought that listing a few of these out more specifically might help explain what made Ronald such a special musician. To introduce the topic, I thought I'd share an interview that I read with Jerry Garcia a number of years ago, and I believe the interviewer asked Jerry why he had picked up the guitar as opposed to some other instrument, and Jerry responded, in my mind with a twinkle in his eye, that he had always wanted to play, maybe it was the piano or the trumpet, and then he said, with this guitar pedal here, I can do those things. Ronald used a bunch of different effects, but one of the ones he used most frequently, and the instrument that he mimicked the most, was the organ. So to help illustrate what's going on live here, I have this wonderful rendering here of the band that I did. And what's important here is that Stephen Drozd, as I mentioned, he's a multi-instrumentalist. And live he focused on the drums, but he also had a keyboard set off to the side. And when you hear the piano sound in their live music, it's coming from the keyboard and Stephen Drozd. But the organ sound is coming from Ronald, and Ronald over here on guitar, and here he is with the hair. And it is not coming from Stephen Drozd on the keyboard. The organ sound is coming from Ronald on guitar.
A genius when he's born, he contemplates his consciousness. He feels his hands, they sweat. He can't connect it yet. He pulls on his resources, and he calls up the insects he commands, and the water bugs attack the place. My brother's at the
A few of the reviews I've read have indicated, and I believe it was in that New York Times review from 1995, they referred to Ronald's playing, you know, the pyrotechnics of Ronald's playing. There's another review I read which talked about the carnivalesque sweetness of Ronald's playing, and I really hear that here with the organ sound.
stops to use the phone. They can't remember where the house is. A convict has come, so he needs his friends once more. So he pulls on his resources, and he calls on
What makes a good riff?
Just the power, the sheer, it just engulfs you. It's like, you know, you just feel it, you know, it makes you vibrate.
The next effect I'd like to discuss is what I'm calling a roar. He uses it primarily in the song Unconsciously Screaming, perhaps to, you know, get a scream sound out of the guitar, but he gets it from combining the distortion with a wah-wah pedal. For those that don't know, a wah-wah pedal is used to make, as its name implies, that wah-wah sound that you may have heard there in Ronald's playing there. It was employed heavily by Jimi Hendrix and can be heard in his song Purple Haze. For reasons that I will discuss in a section on Ronald's gear, though, Ronald had a very unique wah-wah pedal, so he was getting likely a very different sound when he was using his wah-wah pedal. next effect I'm going to mention is what I've called deep space, because that's what it sounds like to me, like you're floating out there amongst the stars. He uses it primarily in She Don't Use Jelly as the song transitions between the chorus and the verse, and you'll notice that he executes it with some vigor and some physicality. He just pounds the instrument right across the strings. On the 1996 CD, he also syncopates this deep space sound. It's on the tune Take Me to Mars, and I'm not going to play the whole song here, but like most of this 96 album, it's excellent, and it really is a study in this kind of using noise musically type thing. So the effect here is that Ronald played in stereo, and I don't know the numbers of guitarists that played in stereo, but it's basically just miking two different amps and having some other gear that allows the guitarist to shift the sound. And unless you have headphones, it's kind of tough to hear it just through speakers, say. And let me here make my headphones recommendation and say that the best way to hear Ronald on all this stuff is through a pair of headphones. They don't need to be expensive, but a nice over-the-ear pair of headphones. I have a pair of Monoprice headphones, and they're excellent and cost me, I think, less than $20. But they'll help you hear what Ronald's doing. And the first clip here is from the Oklahoma City '94 show and the tune Barbary Coast. And visually, you can see what Ronald's doing, at least what it appears to me what he's doing, and as he's playing and strumming the guitar, he's turning, trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. And I just really love this little clip here. The other clip I have here is an audio clip, and again, it's going to be best heard through some headphones, but this is during the middle kind of freak out part of Moth in the Incubator, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on here, and it's all Ronald, but the stereo effect is here, and you can hear the sound shifting from side to side. The last effect I want to mention in this list is the sound of a theremin. gets it, I think, from using the slide. I've heard it a couple places, but this clip from the 96 show is probably my favorite. It's from the tune Placebo Head Wound, and there's a little coda here at the right after the song ends. And Ronald has a little bit of space, and he really takes it and runs with it. And what you'll hear on the front end is just some out-of-the-world guitar, and then on the back end, he really turns the slide into something that, again, sounds to me like it's a theremin.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Bye. Thanks.
I've separated out techniques and effects to try and explain and provide some sort of reference point to Ronald's playing. He, though, used this stuff seamlessly and frequently used this stuff together to provide these, unique and different sounds. One particular example is from the song Turn It On. In the recorded version, there are some tracked-in vocals as Wayne sings the chorus. It's just this ah in the background. Well, live they were more limited, but instead of jettisoning this aspect of the song, Ronald reproduces it using the slide and some effect here, and I just love this. Ronald was able to achieve something that not every musician is able to achieve, and even some very talented musicians have had trouble achieving this, and that is having their own sound. I was recently watching a documentary on the bass player Jocko, and in the very first few minutes of that documentary, and I immediately thought of Ronald when I heard it, one of the people that they interviewed said, the thing about Jocko is when you heard his bass, you knew it was Jocko. And in a similar way, Ronald was able to develop, both through his techniques and through the effects, a certain tone. And when you hear it, you know it's Ronald. My wife has a cousin, in fact, that is a quite talented cello player. And one time I was talking to her, and we were discussing the instrument. She'd been playing it for a number of years. And I said, what are you trying to achieve at this point? I mean, you obviously know how to play the instrument and you're quite skilled at it. What's the next step here? Her response was, well, at this point, you're really trying to put yourself into the sound of the instrument. You're trying to make the instrument sound like it's unique to you. I'd next like to discuss a bit of what we know about Ronald's influences. I don't have that much information, but in the 2006 book Staring at Sound by Jim DeRogatis, which chronicles the band's history, Stephen Droz says that prior to joining the band, Ronald was in a new wave band, and he calls it an over-the-top new wave band called Snail. I found one reference to Snail opening up for the Flaming Lips on the band's website, but that's about it. I went so far as to call 3 Oklahoma City record stores and asking anyone about a band called Snail from the late 80s or early 90s, but no one knew what I was talking about. The book also says that Ronald listened to a lot of Peter Gabriel era Genesis, which makes me think he listened to other prog rock, likely Steve Howe, the guitarist from Yes, and Adrian Belew from King Crimson. I also picked up a copy of their Fearless Freaks CD, which was released as part of their documentary of the same name and was part of their 20th anniversary. I included a portion of the documentary in the history segment, but that's the only portion on Ronald, and if I'm not mistaken, it clocks in at just over a minute and a half, which kind of blows my mind. But anyway, the CD has 4 songs from the Ronald Jones era. They're live recordings. The quality of the recordings is really quite bad, and I don't recommend buying it. The band really did Ronald justice in releasing the 1996 concert that's part of the Hetty Nugs box set. One song they did include as part of the Fearless Freaks CD is their cover of Space Age Love Song by Flock of Seagulls. In the liner notes, which Wayne penned himself, he says, "This was during the Lollapalooza tour in Chicago. Ronald loved a lot of the 80s stuff." In talking to an acquaintance that's a guitar player about Ronald, he said, Ronald sounds like Adrian Belew. Now, Adrian Belew is an American guitarist who played for a number of years for a band called King Crimson. I knew of the band, but I have not listened to a bunch of their music, and I probably wouldn't have pulled them up on YouTube had I not been putting this piece together on Ronald. For those that are not familiar, King Crimson is cited as one of the primary prog rock bands, the other being the band Yes. Prog rock being, and I'm going to go to dictionary.com here, a style of music originating in the 1970s and characterized by large-scale composition, often on epic themes in which musicians display instrumental virtuosity. And virtuosity here indicating that it's played by some very skilled musicians. And Adrian Belew is no exception here. He is a gifted guitarist, but in addition, he also has a unique approach to it. He has a talent for electronically manipulating the sound of the guitar, and in short, he can make some sounds come from the guitar that you would not normally associate with a guitar.
So that was the first things I remember trying to do with guitar that was a little out of the ordinary.
So here we have our nice herd of African elephants, and in just a second I'll explain the way this comes about.
It was a combination of any fuzz tone, really. I use a graphic fuzz tone, and a flanger, making sure that the flanger curves up and down, the sound of it wavers up and down, and that gives kind of the elephant trumpet sound. Here's the flanger by itself. Then it's combined with the hand technique of sliding the guitar, sliding up the guitar. So here we go. Rhino sound, which is a bit more complicated and required some hand techniques, which I think are very important. And in this case, the idea was to try and get a sound which was non-harmonic at all. It was a cluster of sounds. So I would put the slide at an angle, an oblique angle across the guitar, you see, and strike the guitar with the volume off, then turning the volume up. So what you would get is just a cluster of bad notes, like this. Now the devices being used at this point are a fuzz tone, a flanger with a very breathy tone, that was also very important, and a little bit of echo.
The sound of his that I'd like to feature here is the sound of a bird. After watching just a few minutes of him here, I was convinced that Ronald listened to him and was likely influenced by him. You'll note in this clip that Adrian Belew is also playing the slide. However, he is playing over top of the neck of the guitar, as opposed to Ronald, who played it, I guess, more traditionally underneath the neck of the guitar. Now, the thing about these birds is that Adrian Belew plays them, and you sound like you're, it's a sunny day at the beach and there's seagulls flying by. With Ronald, his birds are completely different. They sound like they could be a bird of prey or perhaps something from a Tim Burton movie. It's a completely different sound.
Yeah? Nobody? Okay. All right, thanks. Can we use it for the rest of the show? Okay.
I did find another interesting reference to Adrian Belew. I mentioned that the only contemporary guitarist that I found that referenced Ronald Jones was this interview that I found with Adam Jones of the band Tool. Well, in putting this documentary together and after this conversation with his acquaintance, I went back to that interview, and right there at the top, one of the top two guitar players that Adam Jones mentions is Adrian Belew. So here he is referencing Adrian Belew and Ronald Jones, both in the same list, I guess, of notable guitar players.
One of the first sounds that really interested me to try and affect on guitar was the sound of a seagull, which I've used on lots of records since. It's really quite easy. It's just a matter of using an echo, a slide, and your volume control. Here's a sound I don't know how to explain because I have no idea how it works. I just touch my fingers to the fretboard and we get these little bird sounds, all right? It's coming through an item called a PV synthesizer, a pitch-to-voltage synthesizer, but the darn thing has a mind of its own. And here we go.
I'd like to discuss some of the gear that Ronald used, and I'll start by saying that I'm not a musician, and what's included here is what I've been able to glean from the internet. Ronald played a Fender Jaguar mostly. It's an offshoot of sorts from the Fender Jazzmaster, which I believe is the guitar favored by Stephen Drozd.
Hey guys, it's Russ, and I wanted to talk today about the difference between a Fender Jazzmaster and a Fender Jaguar. They're very similar guitars. A lot of the time people don't really know the differences between them. They have kind of the same off-waist diagonal body style. Most importantly, they have the same type of floating tremolo, but there are some major differences. Leo had been making this for jazz players. It didn't catch on. It caught on very quickly with surfers. So he was living in California. He was around the whole surf scene that was starting to pop up in the early 60s. And what Leo decided to do was kind of get their input. You know, what do you like about the Jazzmaster? What do you think should be different? And as a result of that, in '62, he designed the Jaguar, which is very much so, I'm sorry while I'm switching here, very closely related to the Jazzmaster, but there are some differences there that were locked in on what the surfers really wanted to have. So this was marketed as a surf guitar, not as a jazz guitar or rock or country or anything else. That's what was happening at the time. One of the things about Jaguars, just kind of jumping off topic, is they have this reputation for being very thin. You know, it's what they've been kind of known for. You kind of think of Johnny Marr, that type of little jangly guitar, and that's something they can certainly do, but I mean they're still essentially Stratocaster pickups. It's still a good long scale. There's a lot of life that comes from the sound there, and there's a lot of warmth, you know. I think it's funny when people think that these guitars can't rock or can't cut through because they sound thin. There's a lot of power that comes through these guitars.
Ronald used a seafoam green model most frequently, though he also had a sunburst model. I like the seafoam green one personally, and I found this nice recreation on the internet, and if I were a guitar player I'd be doing something similar. I really like what this fan has done here. There are a few people on the guitar forums that have some more specific information on his setup. I'll include the links below, but I'm not too interested in that, partly because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but mostly because it's the execution here that's the real story for me. In a 2007 interview, which I've used elsewhere in this project, Stephen Droz mentioned some of the gear that Ronald used, but also confesses that he's not exactly sure how Ronald got certain sounds out of the guitar. He does say in this interview that Ronald re-engineered his wah-wah pedal by taking it apart and making it function differently. That may be part of the reason that when Ronald employs it, he can get that roar sound out of it that I discussed earlier. Chris B., whose videos I've used throughout this project, posted a video and then commented on it that he had corresponded with the guitar tech that worked with Ronald, and he related this story that I'll paraphrase here, but I think it was before their first performance on Letterman, and Ronald had this color coding thing that they did with the wires so that the guitar tech could hook it up a little bit more easily. And as a practical joke, Ronald switched out some of those colors, and the guitar tech explains that he was over there frantically trying to hook everything up, and that Ronald had to come in and laughing that he had frustrated his guitar tech's efforts a little bit.
She's always changing the color of her hair. She don't use nothing that you might
Another thing that Ronald did and is discussed in the forums is he would take a small speaker about the size of a cigarette box, and he would press that against the strings right where the pickups on the guitar are, or where one strums the instrument, and he would get a certain feedback. Jerry Garcia quote, another one, came to mind as I was thinking about Ronald and all this gear. And Jerry was once asked about his approach to the guitar, and his response was that he was a minimalist, and that most people wouldn't think that, I think because of the flourishes that he used, but that he was indeed a minimalist. And I think what he was saying is that he played what the song or the music required, and he wasn't trying to do anything more than that. In a similar way, and despite all this gear and all these sounds that Ronald could generate, I also kind of see Ronald as a minimalist. He was playing what the song required and what was necessary to enhance the song. When Wayne in When You Smile from the Live 96 CD talks about love being like a molecule and all the subatomic particles coming together, Ronald does this squelch, and then he follows it by this massive pick scrape, and then caps it with a deep space sound. So you get 3 or 4 things here, but it just perfectly captures the lyrics that Wayne is laying down here, and I just think it's beautiful.
Every single molecule is right when all of the subatomic pieces come together and unfold themselves in a second.
There are a couple other, say, less obvious guitarists that I'd like to mention here alongside Ronald. I'm including them partly just because I want to, and partly because they are from Oklahoma as well. The first is Jesse Ed Davis.
Honey, and I love that thing that love. Come on in here, Mr. Davis.
Jesse Ed Davis, like Ronald, was from Norman, Oklahoma. He played with a lot of different musicians, most notably, as you saw in that clip, Taj Mahal. I was watching a documentary recently on George Harrison, and as it covered the concerts for Bangladesh that he did, I saw Jesse Ed Davis was part of the house band, as was fellow Oklahoman Leon Russell.
This is Jesse Ed Davis.
Jesse Ed Davis was a fantastic guitar player and was inducted into the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame. The other reason that I wanted to bring him up is that he played slide guitar. I read in a couple of places that Jesse Ed Davis was in fact the one that introduced Wayne Allman to the slide guitar.
It's good time you want, you will have a good time. Everybody in this whole world need a friend. That friend, oh baby, mama don't treat me this away the way.
The other guitarist is J.J. Cale. J.J. Cale was from Tulsa, and his songs Cocaine and After Midnight were made famous by Eric Clapton. But I thought of this footage as I was thinking about Ronald and putting this together. You'll also note that Leon Russell is on keys here.
This is a piece of machinery I earned my living with, right here. It was originally a harmony guitar, and I did some construction on it. Be sure and get the camera in on that. And the reason I did all this, I put all this was a round hole guitar, $50 harmony guitar, and I want to make it a solid body. I was playing on one of Leon's shows, right? I don't know why I'm talking so loud. And one of the pickups went out, so I put another pickup on it, and it got out of hand, as you can see.
So here you have J.J. Cale talking about a guitar that looks like he just picked it up off the curb. There's no back to it, and he's done a few things to it as he talks about there. The thing is that he uses this guitar throughout this footage. It's a working guitar, and I see a certain ingenuity in his being able to use that guitar, and I imagine it produced a unique sound. But I think Ronald also displayed a similar ingenuity in his making or modifying his own guitar pedals, and perhaps some of his other equipment as well.
When your day is done, darling, you want to run cocaine. Once you get over, you can't get back.
Prior to embarking on this project, I was not familiar with Richard Davies. He is a musician from Australia and was in a band called The Moles prior to starting a solo career. He did a stint opening for the Flaming Lips during this Ronald era, and there's some footage on YouTube, I believe it's from New York, of a show where the Flaming Lips served as his backup band, much as they later did for Beck, but the advantage here for Richard Davies is he had Ronald on guitar. I learned that after Ronald left the Flaming Lips, he produced Mr. Davies' album Telegraph, and as I gathered material together, I decided I had to get it to get a complete picture, and I'm really glad I got the album. It's a great album. The music on the album is lighter than the Flaming Lips stuff, but right from the guitar intro on the first track, you can hear Ronald, right there, and then you can hear his presence really throughout the album. And again, headphones are going to be of some assistance here. There is some stuff he's doing, or that's done in the studio here, that simulates some of the stuff that he did on stage as well. I did try and contact Mr. Davies both through his Facebook page and through his management agency, looking for some comment for the Ronald Jones Listening Project, and specifically this piece on his album Telegraph, but he didn't get back to me. A couple of other nice finds for this project from this purchase. First, Ronald shares writing credits on 2 tracks. The other neat thing about Telegraph is that Ronald is also credited with drums on 1 track. Now, I don't know how good a drummer he is, but he was evidently good enough to lay down the drum track on this album that he co-produced, and one that he co-produced for an artist other than himself.
And there are
seeing this credit on the Telegraph album is interesting to me because I hear a certain syncopation in Ronald's playing, a certain sensitivity to rhythm. Those scrapes and swelches that he uses are not random, they're timed in addition, I think he uses them to signal musical transitions to the rest of the band, and especially Stephen Drozd on drums. I'm going to use Unconsciously Screaming here as an example of this syncopation. They played this tune a ton during this period, and this first clip here is from the Live 96 CD that was included in the Heady Notes box set. The intro is unique. I've not heard another version quite like it, and you'll note here how he uses pick scrapes mixed in, and there's, again, just a certain syncopation here to the way he's playing. Now, later in this song, Ronald added this bit that I'm going to show here. I found this interesting because in this Webster Hall clip that was posted by Chris B, I think this may be the first occurrence here of Ronald doing this live. You'll notice how Drozd looks over at him as Ronald's playing and gives him a smile. It looks to me like Stephen Drozd may be hearing it for the first time here as well. Then we have this effect a year later, and this is from the San Francisco show, and Ronald just executes it with ease. He just hits the pedal, and then he looks over at Drozd and keeps the beat with his head and just moves on from there. Did leave the band. I recently read a post from Future Heart, whose clips I've used in this project. The post was from April of 2016, so 20 years after Ronald's last show with the band. The post includes some excerpts from Staring at Sound, again, the book about the Flaming Lips that I cited earlier. And I had not read those excerpts, but in them, the band says that Ronald came to each of them individually with an ultimatum, either him or Stephen Drozd. There are some things that are known about Ronald's departure from the band, but I don't believe Ronald has ever made a statement about it, which leaves room for some speculation. A frequently listed reason for Ronald's departure is Stephen Dro's growing heroin problem. His use was discussed openly in their Fearless Freaks documentary, and it really shows the ravaging effects that heroin addiction can have on someone. The segment could be a PSA on why not to do heroin, and Stephen really looks to be in some dire straits here at the time of its filming. The segment from the documentary was filmed just before Stephen and Wayne began their first recording sessions for Yoshimi, so I believe it was about 1998. In the interview, Stephen Dro states that he started to realize he was really hooked on heroin about 5 years prior, and assuming that's accurate, that would have been about 1994 or maybe 1995, and would have made Ronald a direct witness to this escalating addiction. In a 2011 interview, Wayne has said that Stephen's addiction was so bad during this period that the band wondered if he would be alive to finish the recording of Yoshimi. Wayne has also said that Ronald was very introverted, and Ronald was not at all interested in the recognition that was coming with the band's success. Plus, Wayne has pointed out that Ronald did not seem to be a fan of the touring and recording schedule. The recording schedule was a lot slower at the time, Wayne has said. And the band played about 300 shows during this period, and per Wayne, it's more shows than the band has ever played. Of other facts here. I think in Ronald's last year with the band, Wayne's father passed away suddenly, and I'm sure this affected the working relationships in the band, especially given Wayne's leadership role in the band. You know, it's his band after all. The Clouds Keeps Metallic album also didn't sell well during the time in which it was released. Wayne has talked about this time and his fear that the band would end up playing Don't Use Jelly on the State Fair circuit shortly. With Ronald's ultimatum, the band had to make a call, and I don't fault them for the call. They made a huge musical pivot, and they found greater popular and critical success. I do wonder, though, why amends haven't been made at this point. Ronald was a hometown find after all, and again a couple facts here from Staring at Sound. Scott Booker, the band's longtime manager, had been a teacher previously and had taught at Ronald's high school while Ronald was a student there. And he may have even had a role in recruiting Ronald, I don't know. But John Mooneyham, the band's interim guitarist just prior to Ronald, and actually the one that recommended Ronald to the band, is still on the Oklahoma City music scene, and I think he's got a radio show or something, but he's also still friendly with the band. I learned from the Future Heart post that Michael Ivins roomed with Ronald a lot when they were on tour. As Wayne mentioned in that piece from Fearless Freaks as well, Steven and Ronald were on the same musical plane. I did find this quote from a 2014 kind of Rolling Stone throwback piece where Stephen Drozd was asked about this picture, and this is what he had to say, and you'll note that his first thought here is of Ronald. Stephen, though, has also said that he's not seen Ronald. I believe it was a 2014 interview. He said he has not seen Ronald since 1998. Future Heart goes on to wonder in the post about what could have been and what the band ended up becoming, and with their musical pivot. I've though still wondered about what could still be, and I guess that's the other reason I'm putting this project together. Perhaps it's a bit of a midlife crisis of sorts for me, but Ronald is just a couple years older than I am, not that old in my opinion, but in his mid-40s, and based on what Stephen Drozd said in 2014, is not doing much these days and may not even be playing music at all. I've read more than a few interviews with Wayne. He gives a lot of them, and many of them were done in the promotion of the Hetty Nugs Cloud States Metallic re-release. Wayne is frequently asked about Ronald, and I must admit here to having a bit of a running conversation in my head with Wayne on the subject of Ronald. Wayne has talked about Ronald's departure in the context of the band's change in sound. Wayne was clearly done with the distorted guitars. I find this a bit ironic because I hear a lot of Ronald's palette in electronic dance music, I guess is the broad term. Ronald was making similar sounds using his guitar instead of, say, a laptop. He was producing electronic music, in my mind, in a distinctly analog way. In other interviews, Wayne has said that he thinks Ronald would love the band's newer music as well. I personally absolutely believe that Ronald could seamlessly contribute to the new material, and he can make those songs better live. I think in all the stuff that I've listened to and watched, that Ronald was always trying to make the Flaming Lips songs better in, you know, the live concert. He was always working those songs and trying to add something to them. Wayne has mentioned in a couple of places how difficult Ronald was to work with. It's an opinion that I've not seen in any of the interviews that I've read with Stephen Droz. One such place that Wayne mentioned this was in the Oklahoma City newspaper, the Oklahoman, as part of the Clouds re-release promotion. Again, one of these interviews that he did in late 2015. this same interview, Wayne is mentioning how difficult it was to work with Ronald, and then he goes on to praise the talents of Miley Cyrus while promoting his also recent collaboration with her. And I'm just going to say, Wayne, that's not helpful. It's goodness gracious, they're really two artists that are completely different. What Ronald offered was worlds apart from anything that I've heard out of Miley Cyrus. Wayne has attributed the continued interest in Ronald to the mystery surrounding his departure. He called it an exaggerated mythology around Ronald in one interview. And while I understand that point, I'd also point out that it's premised, the mystery is premised, on the music that Ronald played. And the mystery itself has power, in my opinion, because of what an exceptional musician he was. Wayne's mentioned in a couple of these interviews that he and the band are working on something related to Ronald, perhaps a documentary or something is what he mentioned. I, for one, eagerly await whatever the band produces, and really this project that I've put together is really just a stopgap. I'm frankly still surprised that in 20 years since his last show that there's not more out there on him about how he played and how he approached the instrument.
Why do birds always fly south when sometimes it's warm with your head? And if God hears all my questions, well, how come there's never an answer?
I do have a couple of personal thoughts on Ronald's playing that I'd like to share before I wrap up. These get a little philosophical, but you know, I've spent about a year working on this thing, so I've had some time to think about it. I've shared those Stephen Droz quotes in which he compares Ronald to a cross between Kevin Shields and Miles Davis. I agree with that comparison, and perhaps this is a bit of teasing out that Miles Davis side of the equation, there was something also distinctly Hendrix about Ronald's playing. I know that's a bit of a loaded statement, but I think it was a similarity in the way they approached the instrument and how they pushed the instrument and the sound of the electric guitar. They did have different starting points or primary influences. For Jimi Hendrix it was the blues, and for Ronald perhaps it was prog rock with some elements of, say, punk rock. Again, it's hard to identify the starting point with Ronald, which for me is the wonderful thing about Ronald. To the degree, though, that Ronald's starting point is prog rock, for me that typically entails a player's ability and how fast you can play scales and how clean they are. It can get a little bit antiseptic. Ronald, though, didn't play that way. His playing was distinctly rock and roll, and it was distinctly, in my opinion, Chuck Berry. As Adam Jones, the guitarist from Tool, put it, Ronald Jones played with heart.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
The other philosophical point here, and this does get quite philosophical, is that Ronald's playing for me is analogous to his being kind of a musical Holden Caulfield. Instead of the kids in the rye, he's catching sounds in the rye, and he's using them musically and saving them, not from the phonies, but he's saving them from just becoming ordinary noise. And I sense this balancing act in his playing between, sheer noise and music throughout his playing, and I just find it absolutely fascinating.
I'd like to thank Cambridge Soundworks, Guitar Center, Academy of Art College, Budweiser, and Pepsi for making this free concert possible. And a big thank you to Flaming Lips. I'm Mo from Live 105. We'll see you next time.
This song makes me think of this more than the Love Your Brain track from the 96 live concert that was included there with the Hetty Nugs box set. It really balances this line between music and noise just almost treacherously. But here I put it against something that is, for Future Heart, something that I guess that could have been.
You shot yourself. Yes, but it's okay. Marlo, look at this. I'm really okay. Trust me. Everything's gonna be fine.
Hank Trey and I hope you've enjoyed the Ronald Jones Listening Project. Again, I did not come to this as some huge Flaming Lips fan. I've put a fair amount of work and research into this, but I'm sure I've made errors. I really only hope to have added to the conversation about what a great musician Ronald Jones was. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite clips from the live 1996 concert. This is from the end of the When You Smile track. I love it because it's improvisational and it's just a beautiful little solo. I think it perfectly captures Ronald's soulful playing, and to me it sounds like a church organ. Ronald, if you're watching, thanks for all the great music, and words really can't describe how much I really hope to hear you play again live.